welcome to this week's adventure with the Coalition for Election Integrity. We have a great and special guest tonight. His name is Trevor Loudon. Trevor has been instrumental in waking people up to the fact that we have the enemy within our ranks. And specifically, his book, The White House Reds, is, listen, it's unbelievable. And the associations drawn in here that Trevor knows and advises us on, like, these are, you couldn't get such conspiracy and such apparatchiks without design. And this one happens to be autographed by Trevor, because when Trevor was at our Rod of Iron, he writes to my friend Frank Scavo, "Thank you for standing and sacrificing for liberty." Because I did tell Trevor that I spent 60 days. What Trevor has to tell us tonight is, listen, it's stuff that we need to be aware of, because we wonder how are things going wrong? How do they have plans to settle 15 million illegal immigrants in Scranton, like, of all places? So without further ado, Trevor, can you tell us what you've learned that's applicable to today and what's going on?
Sure. Well, thanks very much for inviting me for a start. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
I hope you can understand the Southern accent all right. But originally from New Zealand. But look, I'll start with this. This is how the Chinese have many plans to take down America, but this is how the electoral plan is working. Now, does anybody remember when Virginia was a really, really red state? And then about 2008, it started to go a little bit purple. They went for Obama, and it got worse and worse and worse. And now it's pretty much purple, pretty much blue, except for the governor. They made a bit of progress a couple of years ago, but then they lost it again in the last election. So that happened because in 2005, a pro-Chinese communist group called Liberation Road, the same people that started Black Lives Matter, set up a voter registration organization in Northern Virginia called the New Virginia Majority. And they wear orange T-shirts, and they look like Acorn. And many of them were ex-Acorn people. And they went out over about 8 or 9 years. They signed up 300,000 minority voters in Northern Virginia. And then they worked with the governor of Virginia, the left-wing Democrat, Terry McAuliffe, to personally sign 200,000 pardons for Virginia felons against the Constitution of Virginia. He had to sign them all individually so that 200,000 Virginia felons could also vote. Well, there's 200 what they used to flip Virginia. And in 2018, when it was all blue, New Virginia Majority put an op-ed in the New York Times claiming full credit for it. They didn't mention the Chinese stuff. Well, the reason they were so efficient is they were using GIS computerized maps. They had every single precinct in Virginia mapped out. They could tell you the income levels, the voting patterns, and most importantly, the ethnicity of various neighborhoods. So they could send Iranian volunteers into Iranian neighborhoods, Vietnamese volunteers into Vietnamese neighborhoods to maximize the vote and to get out the vote. Now, those maps were made on contract and still are being made by a Liberation Road communist called Steve McClure, who's been making those maps on contract, working out of the geography department of Wuhan University, China. So they're using Chinese computers, Chinese staff to make maps to flip districts in Virginia. Now, this network isn't just in Virginia. They have a network right through the South. In the Carolinas, they have the Carolina Federation, which is why North Carolina has a Democrat governor, and it's now a purple state. And in Tennessee, in Florida, they have Florida Rising, which almost elected Andrew Gillum a few years ago. In Texas, they have the Texas Organizing Project. And in Georgia, they have New Georgia Project, which is Stacey Abrams' outfit. In Arizona, they have Lucha. See, all of the key, they are targeting the South, because the Chinese reason that the Democrats have gone so far to the left they've burnt off a lot of their. You've got to go Stacey Abrams and mobilize the Black and Latino white college kid populations to win. Now, they also have, see if these states, these are familiar. And in Michigan, they had Detroit Action. In Wisconsin, they had Black leaders organizing communities. In Pennsylvania, they have Pennsylvania Stands Up. In Georgia, as I said, they had New Georgia Project. Network claims that it won 6 of the 7 states they targeted in 2020 and 2022 for Biden-Harris. That they basically kept the Senate, almost took the House back, and won for Biden-Harris. Now, Lucha in Arizona made 8 million phone calls and knocked on $1.8 million doors. And Black leaders organizing communities in Wisconsin claim they took Biden from a 20,000 deficit in 2020 to a 20,000 surplus in 2024. They claim they won every state they targeted except for Florida. They claim they won the election for Biden-Harris. Now, I know about electronic stuff. I know about all of the scams that go on. But what we need to understand is the Chinese have networks in all of the key swing states that use Black Lives Matter activists to get out the vote in the inner cities, Milwaukee, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Atlanta. So if anybody's seen the movie, the documentary 2000 Mules by Catherine Engelbrecht, and I'm sure you all have, she said she found a network of nonprofits in the key states using Black Lives Matter activists to stuff ballots. Well, I found exactly the same organizations from the Chinese consulate in San Francisco who are using Black Lives Matter activists to stuff ballots in key swing states, in the big inner cities, the Black and Latino suburbs of the 7 key states. And they're doing it now. Pennsylvania Stands Up is very active in your state. Detroit Action is very active. Black leaders organizing communities is very active right now in Wisconsin. So these organizations are all tied directly to Asians for Black Lives and a group called Seed the Vote, SEED, the Vote, which are both fronts for the Chinese Progressive Association of San Francisco. That is a community organization set up in 1972 in San Francisco to support communist China. Because back in the 70s, the Chinese community of San Francisco was very pro-Taiwan, very anti-Mao. Now it's flipped because of the work of the Chinese Progressive Association, which also has a branch in New York and another one in Boston. But this is their strategy. They take over the inner cities, they mobilize the ethnic communities of the inner cities, and they get them out to vote or vote in their name. And this Chinese Progressive Association also set up Asians for Black Lives, which set up Black Lives Matter. So, and we had the COVID, which came from China, which gave the excuse for mail-in ballots, and the massive rioting that went on, and all these young Black and Latino kids who were told Trump's a fascist, Republicans are a bunch of Nazis and racists. They were then used by Seed the Vote and all of these groups to do massive voter registration, probably cheating in all the big cities to make the steal more believable. So that's what they did. Now, it happens that a woman who is very active in Chinese Progressive Association is a woman called Alicia Garza. Now, Alicia Garza was the founder of Black Lives Matter. Alicia Garza was very close friends of two women, Latifah Simon, who is now running for Congress to replace Barbara Lee in California, and her very good friend Kamala Harris. So Alicia Garza, Latifah Simon, Kamala Harris are buddies. The founder of Black Lives Matter, and Latifah Simon was mentored by Kamala Harris and was put through college by Kamala Harris. She was basically a petty criminal. But Kamala Harris took a shine to her, put her through college, got her elected to the Bay Area Rapid Transit Authority, got her aboard on the Akinade Foundation, a very left-wing foundation, and now she's running for Congress. So let's get back to Kamala Harris. Born in Berkeley in the early 60s. Her father, Don Harris, and Shamala Gopalan. Shamala Tamil Nadu in India. Her parents, her family, I believe, were Indian communists. She came to the Bay Area, very active in left-wing causes, met Don Harris. They formed a couple. They both joined the Afro-American League. This organization was led by a man called, Donald, I've just forgotten his name now, but he became Khalid al-Mansour, who then worked very closely with a sheikh, Saudi Arabian sheikh, to fund young Black and Latino activists into positions of power. It was Khalid al-Mansour who got a communist called Percy Sutton, a Manhattan Borough City Councilor, to write the recommendation to get Barack Obama into Harvard. But then Donald Warden was his name. Donald Warden was the head of the Afro-American League. The Afro-American League spawned the Black Panther Party. The Black Panthers were Maoist, pro-Chinese communists. So this is where Kamala grew up in. She went to rallies in her pushchair. She was shouting, freedom, freedom, as a 5-year-old. As an elementary kid, she was going to meetings of Black women organizing for political action, a hardcore revolutionary group in the Bay Area that got the Marxist Ron Dellums elected to Congress, where he served on the Armed Services Committee as chair of a subcommittee. So Kamala grows up in this hard left environment. Her parents split. She goes to Canada for high school, but comes back to the Bay Area because her father, who had went to Wisconsin after the split, got a job back in the Bay Area as an affirmative action Marxist lecturer at Stanford University. Stanford didn't have enough Marxists in the economics department at the time. Can you believe that? So they hired the most prominent Marxist economist they could find, Don Harris. The Union for Radical Political Economics, a subset of Democratic Socialists of America, it came out of SDS, Students for a Democratic Society, solicited and pressured for Stanford University to hire Don Harris because he was a Marxist. And there is no question of opinion. He would openly call himself a Marxist and write articles with Marx in the heading all about Marxist philosophy, Marxist political economy, etc. There is no doubt that her dad is a Marxist. So then Kamala goes away to George Washington, what's the black, Howard University in Washington, D.C., traditionally black university, where she hung around with the anti-apartheid activists and the radicals. Then she came back and finished her law degree in San Francisco. And then she met up with a young man, well, an older man called Willie Brown. Now, Kamala was 29, Willie Brown was 60. And people make a big deal of the fact that he was a married man and she was, well, he'd been separated from his wife for 10 years. But the thing that they should, and he gave her a couple of jobs that earned her lots of money, $400,000 over 2 years for, one meeting a week jobs. And, but what should have been the concern there was Willie Brown is a communist. He has always been a communist. He was elected by the W.E. Du Bois group in the 1960s to his first public office. That was the youth wing of the Communist Party USA. He was a protege of Carlton Goodlett, a black newspaper man, very prominent in the Bay Area, another long-term Communist Party member who got the Lenin Prize for his peace activism. So Willie Brown was a communist, but he was also a prominent Democrat and became the mayor of San Francisco. But he was still sponsoring Communist Party meetings and functions in San Francisco as late as 2002, 7 years after his relationship with Kamala Harris. And then he really hooked up with Dianne Feinstein, the senator from California, who then the two of them really became Communist China's best friends in the Bay Area. And just by the way, Dianne Feinstein, we all hear her driver was a Chinese spy. Yeah. He wasn't her driver. He was her office manager, her most senior staff member. He worked for her for over 20 years. He was getting Defense Department documents across his desk, and he would liaise for her with the Chinese consul. And I've got a picture of him, Russell Lowe, with the Chinese consul, with Christine Fong, the Chinese spy who was sleeping with Eric Swalwell. But I've also got a picture of Eric Swalwell with the Chinese consul as well. Eric Swalwell was very deep into this stuff. Didn't stop him trying to run for president or serving on the Intelligence Committee at all. So now Kamala's going for politics. Now I want to take a step backwards. I talked about these black networks in the South, these communist networks, these voter registration. This is where all this came from originally. You probably remember the Rainbow Coalition of the 1980s. Jesse Jackson ran for president twice. On the Rainbow Coalition, 84 and 88, he got second in the Democratic primary. A fruitcake like Jesse Jackson, because he borrowed this idea of the Black Panthers. In 1970 in Chicago, the leader of the Black Panthers, Fred Hampton, started his own Rainbow Coalition. He got the Black Panthers, the Young Lords, a radical white group who used to have Confederate symbols on their jackets back that time, and the Puerto Rican Young Lords, the three racial groups, to form the Rainbow Coalition. Well, Jesse Jackson expanded that idea. You get the progressive whites, progressive blacks, progressive Asians for the yellow stripe, progressive Latinos for the brown stripe, Native Americans for the red stripe, greens for the environmentalists, lavender for the gays. That's how it was then. And this is his terminology, not mine. This was the Rainbow Coalition. You get all the minorities with the progressive whites and you try and get a majority. Well, when Jesse Jackson ran, minorities were 19% of the population. Now they're pushing 40%. So, and the Rainbow Coalition was completely run by pro-Chinese Maoists. League of Revolutionary Struggle, Communist Workers' Party, Line of March, Freedom Road Socialist Organization, League of Revolutionary Struggle, all Maoists. The Maoists focus on race. This is why Black Lives Matter is a Maoist organization. The Black Panthers are a Maoist organization. We're a Maoist organization. Mecha, which believes in turning the Southwest back to Mexico, is a Maoist organization. You know, Mao was focused more on race than he was on class, because there was never an industrial working class in China to work with. It was all peasants, and so he used the national question to foment the revolution. And that's what the Black Panthers were, and this is where Kamala Harris comes from. Well, one of the key leaders of the Rainbow Coalition was a young black law student from Stanford, a member of the League of Revolutionary Struggle named Steve Phillips. Steve Phillips left school, left Stanford. The League dissolved in 1990, and most of them went into the Democratic Party. He went into the Democratic Party, stood for school board in San Francisco, but he married into one of the wealthiest families in America, the Sandler family from San Francisco, the Golden West Savings and Loan fortune. That got him $2 billion to play with. And he then joined the Democracy Alliance in 2005, which is Soros, Tom Steyer, Norman Lear, all these, and a whole bunch of unions, all these very rich leftists. You got to spend $200,000 a year just to be a member. You know, and they started to push all their money into the left. All this $2 billion and Soros's money and ballot initiatives behind candidates. So Steve Phillips wrote a book as a New York Times bestseller, supported by Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama, called Brown is the New White. Look it up. Brown is the New White. And what he says is this: he updates the League of Revolutionaries racial strategies of the 80s, the Rainbow Coalition. This is his thesis, we have a majority in America now. The left has a majority. You take the progressive whites, you take the progressive blacks, progressive browns, progressive yellows, progressive reds, progressive greens. That's 51%. 29% progressive whites, all the rest progressives of color, 51%. That is the new American majority. That is the phrase he uses. And so he applied this philosophy when he did mass voter registration drives in 17 southern states in 2008 for a young man called Barack Obama. That's what got Barack Obama ahead of Hillary Clinton, $10 million of Steve Phillips's money. Barack Obama is the Rainbow Coalition candidate. He won on the Rainbow Coalition philosophy: progressive whites, progressive blacks, progressive brown, progressive yellow, all together, 51%. And it's increasing every day, which is why they're bringing in more and more illegals every day, because that's adding to the new American majority. And so then they, in 2018, or probably starting from about 2012, he put his money behind Cory Booker, Crybaby Cory, the senator from New Jersey, who was a classmate of Steve Phillips at Stanford, best friends. Then he put his money behind Andrew Gillum, who ran for the governorship of Florida in 2018, and lost. He put his money, the mayor, the people at lower level who are getting elected to Congress and US Senate. The goal is to run candidates of color, particularly in the South, some southern states, flip North Carolina, flip Arizona. They only have to flip one or two more southern states, especially Florida or Texas, and the Republicans can never win again. If they can flip Florida or Texas, add that to the Electoral College votes of California, you have an unbeatable majority. and then you legalize 30 million illegals who will then vote 85% Democrat, and you can never be beaten. Doesn't matter how bad your government gets, they will still vote for Maduro. They'll still vote for Castro, because that is the road to communism. That's the Chinese road to communism in America. And they have voter registration organizations in almost every state. Almost every state, but they focus on the key swing states. Now, you look up, Pennsylvania stands up. You see the branches they have all over your state. You see what they did in Pittsburgh. You see what they did in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia. But Kamala Harris, her sister is Maya Harris, best friends with Stephen Phillips at Stanford University. Steve Phillips knew the Harris family. Steve Phillips got Tony West, the brother, the husband of Maya Harris, the job as number 3 in the Justice Department under Eric Holder. One of the things he did was represent that Walker Lynn, that Taliban traitor who came back to America. Okay, that was Tony West, the husband of Maya Harris, the brother-in-law of Kamala. Steve Phillips got Kamala Harris elected as the district attorney in San Francisco, and the guy she beat, Guy Hallinan, the guy she beat, ironically, was the communist who first got Willie Brown elected to state representative back in the 60s, when he was head of the W.E. Du Bois Club, the Communist Party youth wing. Then Steve Phillips got Kamala Harris elected to Attorney General from California. Then he got her elected to US Senate. Then he got her, I was saying in 2018, Kamala Harris was going to be the candidate in 2020 for the Democrats. And everybody laughed. Well, I knew she was going to be there because I was following what Steve Phillips was doing. And Kamala Harris fully acknowledges, in her own words, the help that Steve Phillips gave her. Completely acknowledges it. He is her sugar daddy, her Maoist sugar daddy. And so he, when she ran in 2020, she was so unpopular that she flamed out, right? And then Bernie Sanders was getting out of control. Now, he was a commie that they didn't control. He's a communist, but he wasn't under their control. They couldn't control Bernie. So they used Joe Biden, who had no chance whatsoever, who just lost 4 primaries in a row. They said, Joe, the only way we can stop Bernie is to beat him in South Carolina. And so they used Jim Clyburn, who has got a deep Marxist past all of his own in South Carolina, to bring out the black population for Joe so he could beat Bernie, which gave Joe momentum, and all the Kamala momentum shifted to Joe. They got Joe in. They used these networks to get Joe elected, and then Joe brings in Kamala Harris on the back. But I think they thought Joe wasn't going to last so long. But I think Joe didn't want to go to jail, so he hung on tight until they forced him out. I don't know what kind of severance package he got for that. But now Kamala Harris is where she was always supposed to be. And she's just as useless as unlikable as ever, but nobody's going to know that because they're not going to let her get in front of the public. She's already refused one debate with Trump, and I'd be very surprised if she does any more, because she has nothing to gain by the people realizing how stupid and offensive that she is. But she is China's candidate. And if she is elected, you ain't seen nothing yet when it comes to the border. You will see Black Lives Matter in the White House. You will see affirmative action like you have never seen. You will see the persecution of anybody who stands in her way. You will see the legalization of 30 million illegals, all given citizenship and voting rights. And you will see the Justice Department coming after the enemies like you've never seen, because this will be the final communist takedown of America. That is the plan. So that is why I say this election is so darn critical. Every election, they say it's the most critical. But I believe we've been given one last shot at this. We were proven that, I think, when that bullet whizzed past, Nick Trump's ear.
Yeah.
That was the signal that God does not want this country lost, but it isn't the signal that God's going to do it for us. He's just telling us what he wants. He wants us to work our butts off to make it happen. Then we've got to send those illegals home. We got to do RICO lawsuits and all of the big voting fraud machines in all of the big cities, because you can't clean up Philadelphia from Pennsylvania. You can't clean up LA from California on the big vote fraud operations in these big inner cities, and you got to start putting people in jail. If we can deport the illegal immigrants, and if we can start putting people in jail federally for vote fraud, that problem will go away very, very quickly. And America can start then getting back to normal. But we are on a knife edge right now, folks. We are 4 months away from a communist revolution in this country. And I hope I've made my case to make that credible and not hyperbolic, because that's what she is. Kamala Harris, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. She just said that a few days ago. Right. Who do you know that says that, who hasn't been brought up with that kind of stuff since she was in kindergarten? So I'll call it quits there, but I'm happy to take any questions. And just by the way, I want you to look up, go to X, put Trevor Loudon, Kamala Harris, and second or third down will come up my 23-minute video I did on Kamala Harris. I did it for Epoch Times about 3 years ago, but we just re-released it. And my one, it's got 540,000 views. Another girl's got 2.3 million. Many more got 100,000 here, 200,000 there. I think it's been seen by at least 4 million people in the last week.
Good.
And it lays out much of what I've told you tonight. Not all of it, but much of what I've told you tonight. So, but I think that'll be a useful tool for you to maybe circulate and it's got a lot of good graphics in it too. It lays it out with pictures, so that's always helpful. But any questions at all?
The question I have is Steve Phillips. Like, he's the financier, he's the coordinator. Like, does he take trips to China? Like, how can we expose Steve Phillips? Because it seems like he's the key to a lot of this electioneering from China.
Look, I have not proven that he's taken trips to China. I can prove he was a Marxist, Leninist, a Maoist. He says he was a Maoist. I can say he set up a Maoist communist party with his own money, a party called Left Roots in 2013, and still works with these Maoists who do take trips to China. This left-wing group that he financed, when Ferguson, Missouri erupted in 2014, some of these members who were in China at the time caught a plane back to America, went straight out to Ferguson and joined in the riot. But I cannot China direct trips, but he's funding people who do.
And you know what? Okay, so he doesn't go directly to China, but he's got the surrogates, and he doesn't have to go to China. So he's
he doesn't.
Connected, right?
Oh, yeah. But like when I talked about New Virginia Majority, they're using maps made by their own admission in China. That's in-kind donation from a foreign country.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. And the fact that, Eric Swalwell and you said Dianne Feinstein and her chief of staff, that's why we don't have really the military advantage. They come out with whatever technology we have because it's funneled off and siphoned off and sold.
It's stolen. If we get in a war with China, the US will have funded and developed the armies of both sides.
Our own demise.
We We make billions trading with China and spend trillions defending ourselves against the enemy we built. Great deal. Well, meanwhile, we've shut down all the factories in Pennsylvania and Ohio to send them to China so they could build stuff to kill the sons of the out-of-work steel workers who have to join the military because they've got no other future.
Yep, great statement.
But other than that, it's good. Other than that, it's a good deal. It's a good deal.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have a question for Trevor?
I do. Can you comment on the Dominion machine as far as elections, how China has the pulse of what's going on here, or even?
Well, I cannot, there's so many controversial things about this. They say the closest link we have with Dominion is to Venezuela, and we just saw the great election integrity in Venezuela that in the last election, but Venezuela is a puppet of China. So, I think this vote stealing technology and this racial agitation is being used all through Latin America. The pro-Chinese communists now control most of Latin America, including Brazil, which had a very controversial election, a year ago, beating Bolsonaro. And I believe that was the same kind of scenario. It would have been the same playbook as was used in America. Mexico has a communist president now as well, by the way. Obrador, who's just stood down, was a card-carrying member of the Mexican Communist Party for many years, part of the Sao Paulo Forum, which was set up by Fidel Castro and Lula of Brazil, a coalition of Latin American communist parties to recover for communism in Latin America what had been lost in Eastern Europe, their words. So, but I don't, the Chinese, I think the machines probably aren't run by China. I think they're probably run out of Venezuela, maybe some European countries. I think the Chinese would like to keep their hands off that. The Chinese more focus on using their sympathetic communists here to, defraud elections, to cause racial problems, to stir up, and also to buy politicians. Ratcliffe, who was Trump's intelligence advisor, said when the Democrats had the House that the Chinese owned so many Congress members they could determine which legislation passed the Congress and which doesn't, which makes perfect sense. The Chinese have said they want organizations in every single congressional district in the country to influence elections. And they pretty much have them now. And they get the left through ideology and they get the right through money. They co-opt the Republican governors, the Republican city councillors. We'll put a battery factory in your town. Give us $500 million to do it. But bringing the Chinese into your town is like bringing the mafia into your town. They sell drugs to your kids. They steal your technology. They rip the area off. They're just leeches. And so, but that's what we do. We've got, as Lenin said, the capitalists will fight amongst themselves to sell us the rope with which to hang them.
Yeah.
And so, we've got the Republican Party is infiltrated by some of these people. They get the Republicans through money and the Democrats through money and ideology. That's how they basically do it. And that's why they didn't like Trump, because he was outside their sphere of influence. And that's why they had to do everything they could to stop him. Every darn thing they could.